I'm joined by Dr. Mike Jones, Executive Director of Migration Watch UK. Well, we've had David Cameron, we've had Theresa May, we've had Boris Johnson saying if you come to Britain illegally, you won't be allowed to stay. We then got the big speech just over 2 years ago at Lid Airport from Boris. This was the strongest rhetoric yet, wasn't it?
It is, that's correct, but there's always a gap between rhetoric and reality in migration politics, not just in the UK, but also in the US and Western Europe. Politicians talk a good game, but they deliver very poor results that are out of sync with the British public. This is just another classic case study. The number of migrants crossing the Channel illegally this year is higher than it was last year.
No mention of that.
Of course not. We're very close to 2022 numbers, which was the highest year on record in terms of numbers. So clearly the Stop the Boats policy isn't working. And as you say, the root cause of this is the Human Rights Act and the legal architecture that we have.
We focused so much on ECHR because it was an unnamed judge at 10 o'clock at night that stopped that flight going to Rwanda. But the Human Rights Act is potentially a massive problem, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, we were members of the Strasbourg Court, the European Court of Human Rights, long before we had the Human Rights Act. Now, interestingly, if you look at the number of cases issued against the UK by the Strasbourg Court, they've gone down year after year since the introduction of the Human Rights Act. Now ask yourself, why is that? That's because domestic courts are just as zealous.
Yeah, we don't need them anymore. We don't need Strasbourg anymore because our own judges are working off the same rule book, effectively.
Absolutely. And it's the thing is, constitutionally, you can ignore the judgments of international courts because of the principle of parliamentary sovereignty, but you cannot ignore domestic courts because then the Home Secretary would be in contempt of court.
So is the Human Rights Act, in a sense, the absolute nub of this problem when it comes to deporting people?
It's the root cause, yeah. I mean, there are issues with the Strasbourg Court. Don't get me wrong. There are particular arguments regarding its case law, the interference of international courts and so on. But the Human Rights Act is absolutely fundamental to this. It's the root cause of the problem. And the Tories have tried to circumnavigate around it. They've introduced, you know, sticking plaster after sticking plaster, legislation after legislation, but they didn't listen to people like Dominic Raab, for example. They should have got to the root cause and they didn't.
And in the view of Migration Watch, will those planes be taking off this summer?
Maybe, but let's just say hypothetically, some of them did. The numbers are going to be very small, and people aren't talking about this because this is on the request of Kigali, the Rwandan government. They only want a few hundred removed and deported in the first few months because they want a bedding in period. So
we deport 50 one day, and it's a nice day in June or July, and 500 come the next day.
Yeah, I mean, the Times report the numbers could be as low as 200 for the first 2 months. That's not going to act as a deterrent, and of course the election will be done and dusted by then.